Yeah, it says we're live.
Okay, we are live. Good evening or good early or late afternoon to viewers who are tuning in. This is Comic Boom, and with me tonight I have my good friend, confidant, and fellow comic collector and future award winning writer of Batman and Justice League, Dark Knight Nation.
What's going
And
on, guys, man?
today,
Thanks for having me on, Boom.
you bet, you bet. It's good. Dark Knight Nation and I, we like to have a little fun here. There's been a lot of talk of DC Comics 5G, and DC's we think maybe has had some hills and valleys lately. I think creatively with some of the storylines, and Marvel, of course, isn't perfect either. But we thought we'd have a little fun by announcing breaking news that Didio's been fired, Bendis is leaving. Dark Knight Nation and I have been personally hired by Warner Brothers to right the ship. And of course, they couldn't have picked two better people to do it because we're both angry, upset, and drinking. So
Cheers.
perfect time for us to restructure DC Comics, especially going into 5G. So the rules of this here, and people who are joining us in the chat, is that we are using Marvel writers. So it's sort of a gentleman's rules, I guess. We're using any creator, whether it's a writer or artist from Marvel. We can only hire Marvel writers or Marvel artists for DC titles for 5G. So any current writer or artist at DC right now, we can't pick. We got to pick a writer or artist from the competition because Dark Knight and I, we spoke with all the DC writers earlier and we alienated all of them. They don't like us. They're all quitting tomorrow en masse. And fortunately, we got a lot of money to play with. Warner's got a lot of cash. They threw it at us. They said, look, hire who you want. Sky's the limit, but it's got to be from Marvel. So, and plus, I want to piss off Joe Quesada and Trevor Brevoort, and let's have some fun. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, let's start off. We're going to start off with Superman. Superman, currently written by Brian Michael Bendis. Bendis is coming. Bendis, unfortunately, I wish he had gone, but he's still here. But fortunately, in this wonderful Earth designate Prime Point 5, he's been let go. Dark Knight, enlighten me. Who are you putting on Superman?
All right, so I feel like it doesn't have to be said how important the Superman title is because, it's very obvious that DC, to some extent, will always try to put what they might think is top talent on Batman. That is their moneymaker. But the big thing is that Superman is often, and the quality of the Superman title is often reflected in the quality of the universe. So for my pick for Superman, first and foremost, these creators have to be at the top of their game, right?
Absolutely.
So that is my prerequisite. I chose Chip Zdarsky to write Superman. And I also, for art, chose Pepe Larraz to do on art duties. And there's a couple reasons why I chose those guys. One, Chip Zdarsky has proven such a versatility, both in tone and in the way he can play with characterization, which is huge because Superman now has been opened up to a wider cast. We're going to be involved with Lois. We obviously have his son, John, his cast of villains. What is a Superman book without the occasional kind of meeting with Batman? And I think Chip Zdarsky would do an excellent job at valuing the legacy of the character while also being able to push him forward in a brand new direction. I mean, you look at what he's done, for example, with the Spider-Man life story and his Spectacular Spider-Man, tonally a little bit lighter, but also tackling some very serious issues. I mean, what else can you ask for Superman? And I just can't help but feel that Zdarsky would really pour himself into the character. Pepe Larraz, I mean, he absolutely killed it on House of X over the summer. It was a phenomenal looking series. And for me, when I'm choosing an artist for Superman, I need somebody to be able to capture that kind of this simultaneity of the character, that this charming beacon of hope, while also being somebody who can draw Superman flying through a building to stop a bomb or whatever he needs to do. So I just feel like Pepe Larraz visually would do an excellent job. He has these really dynamic ways of setting up his camera angles for the panels. I just think he would do an excellent job visually. So
I gotta compliment you before I give you my choice. Chip Zdarsky is a fantastic choice, and he also I still remember fondly with Marvel when he did those first 12 issues of Marvel 2-in-1, particularly the first 8, and everybody wanted him to write the Fantastic Four, and they didn't. They gave it to Dan Slott, and much to the chagrin of many people, Dan Slott is sort of like the Brian Bendis of Marvel now. I think everyone sort of puts Slott to the side, but Chip Zdarsky is great. His Daredevil is incredible. He's got a great sense of humor. He seems to get along with everybody, and he really gets characterizations. And Superman, with Superman's supporting cast, as he said, he really would be ideally suited for it.
And on top of that, I really want to focus on the guy's versatility. Aside from being able to delineate different characters in the way that he's having them act and the way he's having them speak,
Yeah.
the guy can do so many different tones and make them work. I mean, you read Invaders and it's almost like a historical drama, and then you read Daredevil and it's this crime drama, but then you do the Spectacular Spider-Man and the Marvel 2-in-1, and it's an entirely different tone, and they all work.
And Tevye Shmolka on the line there, he made the comment that can we have him de-age my boy John Kent, Superboy, please? Well,
yeah.
Just to be clear, I don't know if you were on the phone when I was talking to corporate there, Dark Knight, but we got full editorial control. So
we're de-aging the shit out of Superboy.
We're de-aging absolutely. We're de-aging the hell out of John Kent for sure.
And we're putting him the fuck on the Teen Titans. Like, the fact that we're not, like, whether or not it's a Super Sons book or a Teen Titans book with John and Damian, like, those two are a match made in heaven. So yeah, if we want to spin this out, yeah. I mean, if he also wanted to do, say, a Teen Titans Young Justice book, it's Chip Zdarsky and maybe like Humberto Ramos. I feel like Humberto Ramos would bring like that really cool high energy flavor and like youth to it. But I don't want to go too far off on a tangent. Yeah, Chip Zdarsky would be freaking incredible. It was really hard to not put Chip Zdarsky in multiple spots on my list.
Yes.
And again, Pepe Larraz visually is just able to capture the drama and the kind of hopefulness of the character. So, boom, very curious. Who is your pick to tackle Superman?
Yeah, just to be clear, I love Chip Zdarsky and Pepe Larraz. They're both on my list, but with a different title, not surprisingly. Because he's such a versatile potential creative team. Now, having said that, I thought I'd go off on a little beaten path here with Superman, and I actually chose Al Ewing as the writer to basically tell Al Ewing to go nuts, and I'll explain my reasoning in a moment. I chose Nick Klein, who's the current artist on Thor with Donny Cates' Thor, and the reason why is because as much as I'm not a fan of Bendis' Superman, I'm a fan of the concepts he introduced, but he never really resolved the plot lines. I would love Al Ewing to finish that plot line, to do it justice. Specifically, we have Unity. We had Unity Day. We have the United Planets being formed. I think that the early days in the United Planets in the DC universe are a time of chaos. I can't think of a better writer than Al Ewing to write a universe of chaos and a Superman trying to make heads or tails of it. I like to think he'd write a more intelligent Superman than the one that's currently been written by Bendis, that he would make Superman talk like an intelligent person and not like somebody who has lived his every breathing moment in New York City. And it's something that I think it's right up Al Ewing's alley. I think it would challenge him a bit. And I think people would show up in droves, especially since coming off Immortal Hulk. I always think that Immortal Hulk, before Immortal Hulk, Hulk and Superman titles had a lot in common, and that they're kind of stale. You know what I mean? Superman is Superman, Hulk is Hulk. And who would have thought that Al Ewing could do what he did with Immortal Hulk and the ideas that he came out with? And I'm going to exercise our editorial control, and I'm going to give Al Ewing a lot of rope to basically do what he wants with Superman here on this one. And Nick Klein, I mean, you only need to look at his art on Donny Cates' store right now to know that that's the guy to write that sort of multiversal epic.
Yeah, you know what's really funny? I have those exact two paired on another book. Those exact two are paired on another book. So I can definitely see where you're going with this. I mean, yeah, Nick Klein, the thing I love about his art is the way it really like the dynamics of the camera angle, because he's able to make everything feel so explosive, you know? And there's something about Superman that, you know, he can do these paramount tasks with ease, but something about establishing some great camera angles and shots while he's doing those things just make them so much more dynamic. They don't make it look like such an easy task. You really begin to kind of fully form the idea of, oh, this is like a 6 foot tall guy pushing a, I don't know, 100-foot plane. You know what I mean? So I think it's a great pick. I think Al Ewing would be super interesting for Superman, just because he has a tendency to really fine tune and walk a very narrow path into a subsect of a character's continuity.
Yeah.
You know, and establish on that. Obviously, Immortal Hulk is one of the best books of the big two and has been for like the last 2 years. So yeah, I think that you have a really great pick going on there. Also in the chat too, I see a lot of people are telling us to put DC writers on DC books. For those of you that are just joining us, we are specifically taking creators from Marvel Comics and putting them on DC books.
Yeah, because we're the new editors in chief of DC Comics, thank God. And I tell you, we had so much joy this morning. I made a few phone calls. I insisted on talking personally with Bendis because I didn't want to leave. You know, I didn't want to fire him on, you know, leave a message saying you're fired. I wanted to talk to him personally so I could hear him cry. And as he was combing his bald head. And that's what happened. And I got to tell you guys, it was a great moment. I've been drinking ever since. And Dark Knight, who'd you call?
Well, first I called my mom to tell her that I got such a good job working for DC Comics.
Yeah.
Also, I just got caught in the chat. Somebody said Bendis needs to be fired from Marvel Comics. Well, he's not working for Marvel Comics.
Breaking news. Read, look at the screen.
Oh, he's fired from DC, but I'm saying somebody in the chat said that he needs to be fired from Marvel Comics, which I don't think is an issue right now, but yeah, no, I'd probably call my mom. Next, I would also call Bendis. And you know what I would do? I'd get in on that call with you and just listen in a conference call and laugh. I would laugh maniacally. And then
I would say, well, actually, it started off very polite. I said, look, Brian, I said, you don't know me, but all you need to know is that I've as a fan, I've forgotten more about writing than you'll ever know, and I don't even write. I was given a lot of power, and I'm using it. And you know, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but we're letting you go, and we're going with somebody that understands dialogue, story structure, and appropriate use of space, compression versus decompression. And you know, at the end of the day, we want our comic books to sell, and you know, it was good to hear. We had Diamond Distributions has reported a triple ordering on all sales upon being notified of the news. This is a good thing, people. This is a good thing. We're
making strides. We're making some real strides in the industry, and we will take all the credit.
Yeah.
I'll be ready for Neil Gaiman to talk about me instead of Jim Shooter at college university speeches.
Yeah. So talk to me about Action Comics. What are we going to do about Action Comics? What Marvel creators are we going to put on that title?
So Action Comics. I think while being a Superman book, I think the cool thing about Action Comics and Detective Comics, with respects to the Superman and Detective Comics, are able to show a very different side of the character. And for me, I wanted to take a little bit more of a more serious approach in Action Comics, a little bit less levity, a little bit more high stakes and drama. So I chose Charles Soule to write Superman, and I
Nice.
chose RB Silva to draw. So obviously, Charles Soule is a chameleon in comics, and he's done pretty much everything well. From his time currently working in the Star Wars realm of Marvel, excuse
Yeah.
me, of Marvel Comics, to his excellent Daredevil run, his excellent Swamp Thing run for DC.
Yeah.
His time with Wolverine was incredible.
Yeah.
I think that he has a lot of versatility again, like Zdarsky, but I think that he really knows how to build a wider, more high stakes drama, especially based on a lot of his work with like Star Wars and Darth Vader. He's
Yeah.
really great on building canon. And I think that he would bring that very almost operatic level of drama to Superman within the pages of Action Comics. And RB Silva, like Pepe Larraz, is excellent at kind of being able to simultaneously create this kind of lighter tone through his art, but can also evoke the very serious nature of superheroism.
Yeah.
So I think that that would be a really interesting pair. I actually really struggled, and I almost put Nick Klein in this position for artist. Um, but yeah, I think finding the artist for Action Comics was actually like one of the last things I came up with on this list. So it was pretty difficult for me.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Boom?
Well, first I got to just comment. I agree with you in your comments on Charles Soule. I think he's lost a little bit of his luster in the last few years, but I think I'm not really sure why that is. Nothing he's written has really stood out for me in the last few years.
Well, that's
And
because
he did write Superman and Wonder Woman, the Superman Wonder Woman comic during the New 52, and that was actually well received, despite a significant portion of the fan base not being fans of the coupling of Superman and Wonder Woman. But he also, in fairness, him and Scott Snyder have Undiscovered Country. And I think that's really, I've read the first 4 issues of that. And Charles Soule wrote a very long narrative called Letter 44 about a president of the United States preparing the country for an alien invasion. And he's really good at the long narratives too. And he's never really been given an opportunity, I think, to really draw one out, at least not on an epic character like Superman. So I think that's a great choice. And your artist as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean the quick justification for Charles Soule. I think the reason you might not be finding yourself as satisfied with him in recent years is because I know he's been focusing a lot of his time on his own original prose novels.
Yeah.
He just published like a science fiction prose novel through HarperCollins, which obviously that type of literature is just very, very demanding. You know, it's not like a comic where you can do multiple titles. You know, it's very demanding. So I can only think that his primary focus is probably on writing those prose novels. But Boom, what is your pick for Action Comics?
I went very different than you. I went with I did try to be, because the thing is though, when you get jobs like we got now, Dark Knight, we're not just, we can't just be arrogant jerks, right? We have to listen to the masses. And of course, we got the diversity kick, and we got, people that are saying, well, we got to have gender, we got to have more women and all this stuff. Well, I don't think that's the case at all. I'm just going to hire based on merit. And by doing so, I have at least 2 women on this list. And the first one I put on Action Comics, and that was Kelly Thompson. And I chose Kelly Thompson because she's really paid her dues. She's written multiple titles. She's written obviously for Captain Marvel. She's wrote even a Star Wars title, Captain Phasma. She even wrote Gem and the Holograms for a while. She's paid her dues. and I think she's earned it. I think she's writing Captain Marvel as to be a kick-ass character. She even wrote East Coast Avengers, and I thought that putting her on action would be. I think she'd be good at all the at the interplay. She's good at humor. I think she's getting better at it. I find her comic books are getting the dialogue's getting funnier and funnier, and I just think that she's a good choice, and I think it's going to play well against my choice for Superman with Al Ewing, with Superman out there in space, with Kelly Thompson writing, with her experience with Captain Marvel, writing a more grounded Lois Lane and the supporting cast. I think it's going to work well.
I just read your rolling newsreel for this one.
Yeah, it's true. It's breaking news.
That's a good one.
So the artist that I put with Action Comics with Kelly Thompson is the writer. I went with Francesco Manna. He was the artist on Tony Stark Iron Man. I thought I liked it. It was a sort of a darker tone, but he's good with action sequences, and he's good at writing for that more intimate conversations, dialogue, and it's a little bit darker. So I think it's a nice. It's not the type of dark that you see Alex Maleev draw, but it's just a little bit darker, and while at the same time there's some good action there, and I think it's going to be a good interplay with Superman. So that's what I went with that.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, it's not a pick that I would have ever thought of myself, but I think that there's a lot of merit to it. And Kelly Thompson is young. She's upcoming in the industry. She's hungry, so I'm not totally opposed. Yeah. And the nice thing about the Action Comics is, it's a very important line of books, but also it kind of gives people a little bit more creative freedom, because I feel like the namesake titles, like the Superman and the Batman titles, have a little bit more weight in the universe. Yeah. So I'm all for it. I think that's a really interesting pick.
Yeah, and so next up we have we will go to, let's do Wonder Woman next. Wonder Woman. So the Amazing Amazon. Who would you pick for that?
All right. So for Wonder Woman, for me, I think Wonder Woman has to be very distinct in playing in that larger sandbox that is her mythology and the Greek mythology. And while at the same time not shying away from the fact that she is a warrior. I want to see her. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Amazons are really smart female immortal Vikings, and they're fucking cool, from the Mediterranean, and they're fucking cool. So who else is going to do that and build on her mythology while not shying away from that little bit more aggressive nature of the character than Jason Aaron? I think he is perfectly compatible to Wonder Woman, especially based on his work in Thor. He does a very good job kind of doing his research with kind of the dialectical patterns. I think he would write Wonder Woman's dialogue really well. And he does a very good job at honing in on ways to be serious through the dialogue, but also the new breaking news. While also finding a lot of levity. He's excellent at building very long form stories. And I think Wonder Woman is very much in need of a writer who truly cares and wants to make some very big steps forward in her mythology and her continuity. And my artists, I have two potential artists for Wonder Woman, depending on the style of story. And I feel like Russell Dauterman would be an awesome pick, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Worked with Jason Aaron on the Mighty Thor with Jane Foster, and I think that he could also have a very defining run on Wonder Woman. And I have Joe Bennett, who did The Immortal Hulk with Al Ewing. Joe Bennett is incredible at making these really high impact sequential images on the page and making everything feel cinematic, while also being an expert at detailed texturing. You see all of those really gruesome things in Immortal Hulk, like when his limbs and such are in jars or he's being torn apart or whatever. Wonder Woman is a warrior. Wonder Woman is going to be getting down and dirty. Wonder Woman has a fucking sword. So shit's going to get gnarly. And I want as much as I think Dauterman really captures that kind of mythological, almost godlike style of art, that level of fantasy. I think Joe Bennett would be great for those arcs where Jason Aaron really wants to get Wonder Woman down and dirty as the warrior princess that she is. So I just think that pairing, Jason Aaron and Russell Dauterman already having a pre-existing history are going to work really well together. And then Joe Bennett, again, to kind of capture that other side of the character.
Yeah. Excellent choice. Excellent choice. It's hard to disagree with that because the team already has experience writing Thor from what you're talking about. And frankly, Wonder Woman has been in dire need of some revitalization for a very long time. The executives, the corporate at Warner Brothers have been very clear. They said, we actually want people to buy Wonder Woman comic books. We don't just want them to go see the movie. Give us some decent source material. We don't want her to be walked on all the time. Enough of the supplication, getting on your knees. Play down the kindness. Let's have some kick-ass fun here in the comic books. So we're just doing what we're told. And because of that, I had to. This is by far my most radical choice. But I put Donny Cates.
I knew it.
On Wonder Woman. Donny Cates, man. And, Donny Cates, there's that expression in that movie. What was that movie? I can't remember what it is. Oh, they say you never go full retard. When you're in a movie and you're playing a retard, you can never go full retard, right? It's just sort of like, it might be dangerous to go full Donny Cates on Wonder Woman, but that's what we're doing. We're going to go say, Donny, Mr. Cates, do whatever you want. Because we're going into 5G, keep it in the World War II origins, have some fun, kill some Nazis, introduce whatever you want. You got your buddy there, Al Ewing, up there in the pages of Action Comics that I put him on. I mean, have some fun, have a blast. And with Donny Cates, the artist I gave him was Pepe. I always say the name wrong.
Larraz.
Pepe Larraz, yeah. I thought that would be a good combination because to me, there's a vitality to Pepe, to his art, and it works so well for House of X, Powers of X. And you always get a sense of the epicness of the story with Pepe, and I think that worked well for that Hickman series. Mm-hmm. And I think what Donny Cates could bring with his imagination and the mythology that he brings, and what makes Donny Cates so special is that he puts aside his ego a little bit. Yes, he creates a character, and he perhaps you could say that maybe he's building up some of his Venom characters too much, or the Silver Surfer, but he takes existing mythology and he reads the history and he builds on existing history because he loves the history. He gets involved in it, and in that way, he's like Jeff Johns. And I would love to see him pay some respect to Wonder Woman, respect the history, but not be beholden to it, and just let him have some fun.
I agree. I think that's a great pick. I think the issue with Donny Cates was you could pretty much put him on any of the titles that we decided to kind of bring up to question. Donny Cates, the really great thing about Donny Cates, and especially in respect to your pick putting him on for Wonder Woman, is I think that he is one of those writers that would do an excellent job at paying respect to the actual kind of predicated history of the Greek mythology that surrounds Wonder Woman, but he would push it forward. And I think he would bend it a little bit and make it a little bit more comic booky. You know what I mean? It would become a little bit more a product of the medium. I know a lot of people had issue with Brian Azzarello's interpretation, but one of the best parts about it was the way that he reinterpreted Diana's relationship with the Greek pantheon. And I think Donny Cates would do something very similar because it is broad. And even outside of that, Wonder Woman does have her own mythology that is really interesting. And I think that his youth and his spirit would become very evident in writing Wonder Woman. And I think Pepe Larraz was also an excellent pick for Wonder Woman. I can't argue your choice.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. There we go. Sorry, I'm just a little bit distracted there. I'm playing with because we got so much breaking news tonight, guys. Things are happening all over the comic book industry. Everyone's reacting so positively. I just want to thank all the love we get out there because I know how much people were clamoring for Comic Boom and Dark Knight to be hired by Warner Brothers and to get rid of the executive staff wholesale from DC Comics. Just want to apologize to Jim Lee. Everything I said, I thought I was talking to Bendis. You were the first call I made. I apologize, Jim. Say hi to the wife and kids. Okay. Next. Let's talk. I think we should talk. We'll save our Batman to the last. Let's talk Flash.
Okay.
Flash. Tell me about the Flash. Every crisis has a Flash.
Every crisis has a Flash. Now, hot take. Nobody fucking knows how to write the Flash. Real hot take.
Yeah.
I think that the Flash is a very unique character because you can lean into a lot of really great sci-fi. Yeah. But I think when doing that, a lot of writers tend to get really goofy and kooky, which I think takes away from the drama of the storytelling. Who didn't do that? Jeff Johns. Who do I think is going to do a great job with Flash? Donny Cates. I think Donny Cates would be an excellent pick for Flash because I think, first of all, we haven't seen a lot of him playing in the realm of science fiction instead of fantasy. A lot, I guess you would classify most of what he's done more on the fantastical side, aside from maybe the Cosmic Ghost Rider stuff and the Guardians of the Galaxy. But I think having something as broad as the Speed Force to play with, I think Donny Cates would really push this character forward. I think he would breathe a lot of life into Barry. Donny Cates has become profoundly good at writing dialogue in comic book stories. A lot of comic book writers fail at creating dialogue that feels authentic, that feels like people could say it, while also having this exist and be spoken in such a fictional kind of high impact world.
Agreed.
For my artist, I have Stefano Caselli. I believe he's currently doing Avengers, but he's done a lot on the X line. He has done some stuff with Spider-Man. He's done some stuff with Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. He is excellent. He's great at conveying emotion. He's great at conveying like the very fluid action and physical motion. I think that he would do an excellent job. Aside from that, as like a B artist, I picked Marco Cicchetto, who is the current artist on Daredevil with Chip Zdarsky.
Well, let me ask you this, Dark Knight. Let me ask you this, because we know a lot of the fans watching, because remember, we got the entire comic book community to report to here, and we got the Wally West versus Barry Allen. We have the power now to dictate. Is the primary Flash going to be Barry Allen, or is it going to be Wally West?
I think you leave it as Barry. I think Wally West is an incredible character. I think he's a better Flash than Barry.
Let me ask you this. Let me hold you accountable. Do you leave? Are you gonna defer to Donny Cates on that if Donny Cates disagrees with you, or are you gonna hold the editorial line?
I mean, what if he has first and foremost, when I'm hiring a writer, I want to make sure that their head is in the game and that they're writing something that is ultimately going to be the best product possible and create the best possible story. If Donny Cates, somebody of his stature and somebody of his creative impact and innovation, says, I want to play with Wally, I'm going to let him play with Wally. I'm going to let him do it because first and foremost, I care about story. I care about creating good story.
Yeah.
For me, I would prefer to keep Barry Allen in the company of the current Justice League and in that current company. I think, again, Wally West is incredible. And I think that, the idea of having Wally be his own Flash and do his own thing is very important. But I think Wally's real time as being the main mantle Flash is going to be when the likes of Dick Grayson step up to be Batman, when Donna Troy steps up to be Wonder Woman, when Roy Harper steps up to be the new Arrow. That I think would create a much more interesting dynamic. But I'm not going to argue for anybody that likes Wally West, because I like Wally West more than I like Barry Allen. I think Wally is a better Flash, but I don't think Barry has been afforded as much great talent as Wally West has been afforded. I think Barry has been given the opportunity to be written by a lot of people, but none of them have any idea who Barry Allen is. And I'll toe the line right now and say the only person that knows how to write Barry Allen and has proven it is Jeff Johns.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I'm confident that I'm confident that Donny Cates can will make it work regardless of whoever he uses. And who's to say he can't do both? I would trust him to write both Wally and Barry, quite frankly.
Of course, yeah. And the cool thing is, again, he can really play into all of the possibility that comes with the Speed Force. And the thing I like about Donny Cates that makes him versatile in any comic book continuity is that he respects and loves continuity. You know, he's simultaneously able to build on it rather than tearing it down to do what he wants to do. He finds a wonderful position to compromise and tell the best stories he can possibly tell. And the only reason I'm leaving Barry is because I don't think Barry has been afforded such a great legacy. And I also think that Barry deserves that time amongst his peers, amongst Bruce Wayne, Batman, Clark Kent, Superman, so on and so forth.
And I think I know Tevya Smolka on the comments there. He mentioned a good point, and I think he's right on that. That I think what's been missing lately from the Flash comics under Williamson is sort of a lack of. Quality. I don't think Barry Allen's been written particularly in an exciting way or particularly very well. He's not a very good teacher, and his relationship with Wally West has really been, frankly, it's been damaged. And it's been, well, Wally West has been damaged, of course, from Heroes in Crisis, but at least maybe some of that, obviously we're going to try to fix Wally West a little bit coming out of Heroes in Crisis, out of Flash forward now. Wally West, it looks like, but it's been spoiled. So spoiler warning. It does. I can spoil it because I'm the boss now. We're not gonna take 25 issues to bring Wally West's wife and kids back. They're going to be back immediately, and we're not going to make enough of this nonsense. Maybe I'll defer to Donny Cates if we end up going with him, Dark Knight. But I tell you what, man, we need the Flash family to start feeling like a family again. Because the DC in general has been moving away from that with the aging up of John Kent, with the degradation of Wally West's family, coming out of Rebirth. And there's been too much of an embrace of metal and going into death metal now. This 5G, if it should mean anything, I think I'd like to have a little bit more of a focus or an embrace on embracing the Rebirth. But you and I will have to have more corporate meetings to discuss that.
Yeah, my first executive order is that we act like Lobdell never made him Dr. Manhattan. We never speak of it.
Yeah.
What's that you say? Oh, nothing. Next topic. I think though the thing is, again, Wally is a great character, and if I were to put somebody like Donny Cates, I would fully trust him to play with Wally, maybe even do both and discover what that means for Barry and Wally to share that mantle and what that mantle means to each one of them individually. Yeah. But I would like to give it to Barry in this line, unless, unless we're moving into another physical generation of heroes. Yeah. In which case I think Wally would really serve well as the leader of that generation, as he was pretty much the first person to take over a mantle for an extended period of time, which would introduce a really interesting dynamic with him and his peer group. I don't know if it's just because I'm behind. I've been catching up. Tevya Smolka says in the chat, Damian Wayne is now not becoming Robin. He's not Robin anymore. What's that for?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of that. Maybe that's a 5G rumor. Tevya, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't understand your comment. If you're right, we apologize. But I think Damian Wayne still is Robin, but maybe that's a rumor. I mean, we know Damian likely becomes Batman in 5G, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he meant by that.
I mean, it's supposedly Luke Fox, but yeah. As far as I know, Damian Wayne is still Robin.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways,
I
those
just
are
want
my
to build on your comment on the Flash. I think that in order to give justice to what you're talking about and I'm talking about, there's no reason why we shouldn't have another Flash comic. And I think we should have a Flash comic, call it Tales of the Speed Force, and every issue involves Wally West guest starring with another person from the multiverse. And it'll be a way to incorporate the 52 Earths, incorporate that, and it's going to be Wally West having those adventures with the wife and the kids, and Barry Allen can have his own adventures on the side. That way, we can have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, whatever happens. I mean, they're both great characters. They're Tevye and Telhillim 29 are saying that it's in DC solicits for what book? I'm curious. Are you saying he's not Robin because he's not in the solicits for Teen Titans, or does it explicitly say Damian Wayne is not Robin? Also, solicits are tricky, and that could literally be a 2 to 3 issue thing. So I'm really curious. You guys let me know in the chat there. But I did, in terms of my artist, I want to talk about why I picked Marco Cacchetto in particular, because his art is very dynamic, and he, for somebody who can capture all of this action and kineticism, I think he also has this great way of making it feel so inherently comic book without getting super blocky with anatomy or anything. I think he has such a great balance. I think, for me, when I was deciding on a Flash artist, it had to be somebody who I think has done well on either Daredevil or Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Both of my artist picks, one of them has done Spider-Man and the other one has done Daredevil. So I think that he would be an awesome pick because obviously the Flash is running and moving and jumping around a lot, and that can get really boring. And I have a lot of faith in Marco Cacchetto to keep that visually interesting and dynamic.
I think we're thinking along the same way, because I think that part of the I think one of the things that DC has doubled down on for too long has been Brett Booth's art on the Flash, and they've had a very particular kind of. And Brett Booth, by the way, is a great artist. Don't get me wrong, but they've doubled down on a certain type of flavoring for the Flash's art, and this leads into my choice, and I'm sure that this is an artist that you picked for one of your other titles, but I picked for my Flash. I picked Chip Zdarsky as the writer for the Flash, and that the Flash would be Wally West, and that Tradd Moore, who drew the Silver Surfer, his very eclectic, crazy art in Silver Surfer was so flashy, it was crazy, and you got a real sense with Tradd Moore. I thought he did a really good job of conveying the speed and the otherworldly aspect of Silver Surfer as he was traveling from the darkness where he was, confronting Canal or Null or whatever you call him, and then ultimately becoming the Black Surfer. Artistically, I think if there's going to be a DC title that pushes the boundaries in art, I think in this sense we've got Liam Sharp on Green Lantern's done a fairly decent job. High compliments to Liam Sharp on Grant Morrison's Green Lantern. I would love to see Tradd Moore on the Flash, just to really rock the boat on that. And Chip Zdarsky, for all the reasons you previously mentioned. I think that Flash needs some love, but also needs some consistency of characterization. And frankly, whether it's Wally or Barry, I'm not going to treat Chip Zdarsky like Marvel treated him when he did all that great work on Marvel 2-in-1 and they never gave him Fantastic Four. If Chip Zdarsky told me I want to write Barry instead of Wally, okay, I'll give him the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Zdarsky is a great pick. He's very dynamic. I think there's something really special about, especially if you're going the Wally route, he would really capture the levity of Wally West's personality that is inherent to the character, and also be able to do the high drama that can sometimes kind of dwell within the Flash. Tradd Moore was such a great pick. Tradd Moore was such a great pick. I think that he would really bring that crazy, kooky, out there kind of cosmic sci-fi tone and flavor to the artwork. Like, I can just imagine Wally West having a trip throughout the Speed Force drawn by Tradd Moore. And I think that that is such a really great and inventive pick. And artist wise, I didn't even think of Treadmore. So kudos to you, man. That was a great pick.
Yeah. Well, that's why they're paying us the big bucks, my friend.
Fair. I'll take it.
All right. So the next character we're going to discuss is a Green Lantern. Green Lantern, and we're talking. Now, of course, we've had more than one title of Green Lantern in the last, 5 years of DC, but I'm assuming we're talking Hal Jordan Green Lantern, but we do have the power to change that. We can change it to Green Lantern Corps Green Lantern. Dark Knight, who's your Green Lantern? Who's going to be, which Green Lantern would you prefer, since you're calling the shots here, and who's the creative team for Marvel you're assigning it?
I would do a Corps style book with Hal taking a kind of a role as like the ranger of the group, so to speak, and the leader of the Corps being John Stewart. This is where I stole your pairing of Al Ewing and Nick Klein. I think that there's something about the way that Al Ewing can take one aspect of the character's tone and style and really dig deep and embrace it. And I think he would really, really flourish well in a really genre-heavy science fiction Green Lantern style title. I mean, I just feel like he would take it in such a deep and creative direction. I think having the eligibility to play with all of our favorite corpsmen would be great, but obviously for me, Hal is my guy. So I would say Hal is generally the lead, but I certainly would not forbid him from going off and doing a John Stewart centric story, or a Simon Baz centric story, or a Jessica Cruz centric story, so on. Guy Gardner, if he has the chops to write Guy Gardner. I think that he would do well having a cast of characters. I mean, Avengers No Surrender was solid, and that was kind of spearheaded by him. And I think, having that versatility to be able to write a larger cast and an ensemble title is really great, because not a lot of writers can do that successfully. And I think Al Ewing would. And Nick Klein, enough said. He's super dynamic. He's very, very, dynamic is the word. And he's also great at texturing kind of those kind of odd, grotesque textures that you see in Thor, for example, when he's pounding the shit out of people with Mjolnir and you just have blood and guts on it, or when he threw the hammer through that monster in issue 1, which I think would lend itself really well to drawing all these crazy aliens and their textures, and even like the plants on and organic matter on all of these different homeworlds, I think would just be absolutely fantastic. So my pick for the Green Lantern is going to be Al Ewing and Nick Klein.
It's really impossible to disagree with you. In fact, I mean, we could obviously hire them. We could put them on both, because I put Al Ewing on Superman, and I think that there's no reason why it couldn't be on both. Mind you, we got a lot to choose from. Yeah, just a great choice all around. We could flip a coin, and I wouldn't be upset if I lost a toss between the two of us in terms of where we're going to assign Al Ewing. A great choice all around. For Green Lantern, I did something a little different here for Green Lantern. I love a writer by the name of Tini Howard. She's actually writing one of the X titles, and forgive me, I can't remember which it is.
Excalibur.
Yeah, Excalibur. But prior to that, she's actually written. Let me see if I can find a copy of it here. She wrote a number of series that I thought was quite impressive. She wrote The Forgotten Queen. From Valiant Comics, and just really good. I find that I wanted something outside the box for Green Lantern. I wanted to push. I just wanted something different, a different approach. There's always got to be a wild card in there, and then she's my wild card. I wanted to go outside the box, and plus, and for artist, if you want to know how outside the box I went, I went with an artist that I'm not even a fan of, and that's Ed McGuinness.
Wow.
I know I'm not a fan of Ed McGuinness because I don't like his work on the Avengers. It's too big. It's in your face. But you know, his when he was writing that the Avengers tale with the space epic with Starbrand and the way he's drawn She-Hulk and he writes all his characters exaggerated and muscular and over the top and crazy looking and I thought, you know what, a Green Lantern Corps drawn by Ed McGuinness would be memorable. People would pick that up. And Tini Howard's really good at characterization. She's really good at story, and she's good at actually telling a story in like 3 or 4 issues too, and getting to her point quick. And I just thought that's the route to go. And I'm not gonna lie, the fact that she's a woman, hey, I'm a corporate executive. This stuff matters. So when I find quality and it happens to be a woman as well, you're going to have an edge. I'm not going to lie. This is the 21st century. That's just the reality. But she's talented. I'm hiring her based on merit. None of this, none of this SJW nonsense. This woman is good. She knows what she's doing. And Excalibur is entertaining. I've been reading all the X titles. I'm not an X-Men. I'm not an expert on the X-Men, so it's still a little bit of a struggle for me. I have to keep rereading the titles all the time. But in any event, that's my pick. That's definitely probably my biggest outlier out of them all.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely an odd pick. I mean, I think if we were executive partners, I would probably veto Ed McGuinness. And I love his Superman and I love his Batman Superman. I love it. I really do. But I don't think he fits current comics, and I don't think that he has the versatility to do something like Green Lantern, because for me, a strong Green Lantern artist has to be great at texture, because there are going to be so many foreign species and plants and locations that an artist is going to have to be able to render really well. I think Tini Howard's an interesting pick. She had that pretty critically successful Thanos book, which proves a level of capability in science fiction. I haven't read a lot by her. Excalibur is actually the only X book that I didn't pick up, but I'm not opposed to giving her a shot. And my question for you is it an ensemble book, or do you have one particular Green Lantern lead, maybe 2, buddy cop? What's your route?
Well, this is one situation where I would exercise my executive editorial status and try to pick the brain of the writer and try to influence it. I'm not going to lie. And she might be frustrated, but Tini Howard will just have to put up with me. I've always thought that I think the best Green Lantern tale would be one where he's there. The Green Lantern Corps to me is a core, but there shouldn't be. There might be 3,000 of them, but there's a lot of space out there. And quite frankly, it should be extremely rare that anybody ever confronts a Green Lantern. And if any race out there in the galaxy ever confronts a Green Lantern, you should be scared shitless, because this is a green bloody lantern, man. You don't want to mess with a Green Lantern. They are a one-man army, or one woman, one life form army. And I like the idea of a Hal Jordan being a stranger in a strange land, like a Western, wandering from space sector to space sector, doing his job, kicking ass and taking names and reporting back to the Guardians. That's what I like. And I would establish a rule that it's almost like a code of honor, that if you're a Green Lantern Corps, you only call for help at the last minute. Like, that's like, to me, that's like something you don't want to do, because that's like, you don't need help. You're a core only in name, man. You control a sector. You control the sector. You make the call, and there's deference. It's sort of like when Batman wanders into Metropolis. If something goes wrong, he defers to Superman. Superman's in Metropolis. He defers to decision making in Gotham. In Green Lantern Corps, we need some rules, man. We need some codes of conduct and rules. And I would encourage, I would try to impose my will a little bit. And there might be some tension there with the writers that we hire. You and I might get into some arguments on it, but we need some drama in order for Bleeding Cool to report.
Fair. I think that's a really interesting take. I mean, I love Hal, so I'm all for anything you want to do with Hal. We got a really good question in the chat to a newcomer of the stream. Master of Merrill 81 says, one question: can these creatives work these characters without losing the DC feeling? And the one question I want to beg back is, I don't think there is a DC feeling. If by that you mean, will they respect the legacy of these characters? I think yes, because a lot of these people have shown a lot of passion towards the industry and towards what the characters mean at Marvel. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of these people grew up and brought themselves up on reading both publishers. You know, I think the longer you've been reading comics, the less apt you are to sticking to one publisher, myself included. I started out as solely reading DC, and I've become such a big fan of Marvel and a number of independent publishers. If otherwise, I don't think there is a true feeling, because I think that just by the nature of the industry, tonally, we go through so many different kind of status quos. And, you know, most importantly, I think there is a requirement to respect the legacy and respect the continuity of these characters, while also being able to start to tread some new ground. And, you know, as long as that's the case, if that's what you mean by without losing the DC feeling, then yes, I think that they can.
Well, Dark Knight, maybe I misunderstood you, but you and I are going to have some more meetings on this, because I personally would like to do our best to come up with strategies to establish a consistent feeling. And just my initial thoughts on it is, you might very well be right that right now DC's a little bit all over the board, but we've been hired to address that, because I think right now DC has made the mistake of they've thrown shit at a wall, and whatever has stuck, they've stuck with. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Metal sold more than Super Sons did. So let's dump Super Sons. Let's let Bendis. Let's let Bendis age up John Kent that everybody loves. You know, let's get rid of that feeling. You know, everybody loves Doomsday Clock, but well, you know, we're going to let that go by the wayside. This is nonsense. And I have a theory, and this is my theory, and this is what we're going to stop. And this directly answers the question: would you get? Can these creatives work these characters without losing the DC feeling? Yes, they can. First thing you got to do is establish an ending to stories. None of this nonsense, but we've got 12 different storylines going on, and then all of a sudden you reach the 39th issue of, let's say, Justice League, and you don't have an ending, or the bad guys win, and we're going to incorporate the endings of 4 other titles, and then have a big epic, and then defer. As editor-in-chief, I'm not going to defer to my top writer because he wants to work with a guy named Greg Capullo, so again, he wants to do a separate storyline. Nonsense. You put the fans first. End your storylines. And let me tell you something. We can end our storylines on a high note. We can end storylines with a feeling of hope and the good guys winning, and we can still have that sense that there's a payoff at the end of a 6-issue series where there's some sense of satisfaction. You know, if we're gonna expect our fans, expect our readership to pay $3.99 an issue, that's American. In Canada here, I'm paying $5 an issue. I think we have an obligation to finish our stories. And there's a way to do it. And any writer that says to me that, or to you and I, Dark Knight, and says, well, I can't do that, I have a vision, I'll say, well, you know what? You're not good enough yet. Come back when you're good enough, because this is the big 2 you're talking to right now. So if you can't make your story, like, you got to be able to finish. Tell me your vision, and let's finish it. But understand that DC built up a reputation for decades for being a feel-good, you know, happy, you know, they were gods. DCs were the gods. Marvel were the people on the street. How did they do that? They didn't have 24, 36 issue stories. You don't need that. I mean, you got to make your stories tighter and have, you know, Jeff Johns did it. We had it there for 9 months with Out of Rebirth. We had it.
Yeah, but I think that you're defining feeling in a couple different ways, and I think the term "what kind of feeling do we want from this" is really arbitrary and ambiguous. Are we talking tone? Are we talking the nature of the stories? Are we talking the continuity? Also, you know, you're bringing up how, you know, you don't want these large, long-spanning stories. I'll take you and raise you Jeff Johns Green Lantern. I mean, what happens with that? What happens with stories like that? It
Well, wait a
was,
minute.
for all intents and purposes, one very long 75 plus issue narrative.
Well. First, here's the one thing Jeff Johns was able to do differently than most, and this is number one. He actually resolved plot lines, and number two, he Jeff Johns. I suppose if I was to constructively criticize him, he became his own trope. I mean, he's classic for finishing every single issue with a cliffhanger. But he did resolve. He actually did resolve his cliffhangers, and he resolved the plot lines, and it was actually fascinating and interesting. And at the end of reading his Green Lantern, you had Blackest Night. The good guys actually won. It was actually a pretty epic. It was awesome. It was fun. It was great. And each individual arc did have an ending to it. But I'm not gonna be evasive. I'm not gonna avoid your question, Dark Knight. You can hold me accountable. I will not allow 75 issue epic runs. No, that was a mistake. It is a mistake, and I believe it's hurt sales for Green Lantern, even Jeff Johns sales, because having to buy 3 volumes, and I've got all 3 volumes of Darkest Night. Having to buy 3 volumes for a Darkest Night epic or a Blackest Night epic is nonsense. Shouldn't be more than 12 issues. You know, we got old school guys out there making them look stupid, like the Marv Wolfmans and the George Perez's, whose Crisis on Infinite Earths is 12 issues long and still outsells half the modern day epics that are 36 issues long. I mean, come on, like some of this is.
Here's a hot take. Crisis on Infinite Earths is bad. Got him.
The thing is, it's so, and it might be bad, but the fact is that it's still, we can get the best of both worlds, but we have to challenge our writers to do that. And I don't think enough are. That's all I'm saying.
Here's the thing. When it comes to long runs, I get what you're saying. But I also think it's very important that if somebody has a very successful vision of a character and a direction for a character, that they be the ones to take them there, especially if they're able to work with editorial on a really and build a good relationship, because that way you get consensus, and consensus is very important. One of the biggest issues in comics is that people don't stay on titles for long enough, and it feels like you're getting so many different iterations of the character within such a small frame of time. And I think that if we were to find writers who have earned our trust, and as long as we're doing our job in editorial along the way and making sure that the stories and the events that they're throwing into these characters' lives and into their continuities feel like they are building on something in a good way, then I say you let them do it. I don't have any problem with that. And I think that I would very much support having a more concentric vision on a character that does justice by them. My favorite runs on characters tend to be longer runs. My favorite Batman runs are Grant Morrison. They're Scott Snyder. They're those guys that had, for the most part, one strong vision and direction for the character. Were they perfect? No. But I think that way you have an era for a character that is definable. You don't look at a lot of these shorter runs for the most part and look at them as definable, because then the next person just comes up and does something totally different. So I think that, I'm not going to give, Bebop Jim over here, a 75 issue run on Batman just because he wants it. Mm-hmm. There's no way. But, with anything, I think that there are mitigating circumstances, and that if you're able to have that trust in a creator and they have a strong vision and they're willing to work with editorial, and you get a good editor with them, which is just as important as having a good writer, I think you let it happen. And I think you do it without having to feel like you're ripping a Band-Aid off.
Yeah, no, you know what? And like I said, if sales initially in any story are very high, you can look at sales. I mean, look, Al Ewing on Immortal Hulk, that caught people by surprise. I mean, they could have let him go at issue 6 or issue 12. But I mean, look, if sales matter. So look, we're not stupid as executive editors here. If somebody sells a lot of comic books, yeah, they can do a 100-issue run for all I care. But this, I just shy away from this idea. What I don't like and this is where we talk to the writers, like, tell me what your idea is. I mean, King was fired because he couldn't tell editors, and this I heard through the grapevine through various sources, he couldn't tell editors what his story was going to be 6 issues from now. Well, now that's a problem. And this is where, I think this is about the dialogue between writer and artist and everything else. But in any event, obviously it's a moving target a little bit. Obviously, it's always a leap of faith when you deal with new writers. I just want to quickly address the question. It was asked of me, Comic Boom, would I get rid of the emotional spectrum? I'm not a big fan of the emotional spectrum, but let me tell you, as an executive editor, I know enough. I possess enough self-awareness to know, and you do too, Dark Knight, that it's not about me. The emotional spectrum, even though I'm not a fan of it and I don't like it, I think it breaks apart in multiple levels. The fact is, it sells comic books and fans love it. And it's Geoff Johns created it. It's something that's beloved. And until I hear otherwise or see some indication that we get rid of it, I expect writers that we hire to be beholden to it. And if they're going to change it, they better have a very good story reason for doing so. But so I will always put the respect to continuity for those stories that I know readers love ahead of my own selfish desires. Unlike Dan Didio.
Yeah, I mean, and here's where I respect that. And if somebody were to come up to me as me being an executive editor in chief or whatever, and they were to request killing off the emotional spectrum, I would dip my nutsack into their tea because that would be narratively one of the most foolish ideas in comic books ever. Whether or not you like the emotional spectrum, there's no way around saying that the emotional spectrum has opened up numerous opportunities for the Green Lantern mythos. Absolutely. And it has broadened it in such a way that not only can you play with different characters, you can play with entirely different genres, all within one large mythos. Yeah. It expands DC cosmology in a way that is not silly, that is not too far-reaching. It provides ample opportunity for more story. Not to mention just like the broader implications of what that means. And there's a thematic tie that, even if you want to keep to a subtle degree, can be persistent throughout the Green Lantern line. I think that the emotional spectrum is incredible. I love it. I think it's one of the best retcons to Green Lantern ever. And I think that's one of the cornerstones as to why Geoff Johns is credited as being such an incredible builder of story. And it's such an incredible world builder, because to reestablish that is truly genius.
Well, we're going to build on those things that make the fans happy. And the other thing I can tell you, I know I can speak on behalf of Dark Knight when I say this to everyone watching, that as leaders of as the runners, as the rulers supreme of Kingdom DC, as executive editors, I can assure you that we're not going to give you any of this nonsense political garbage speak, double speak about how we don't give fans what they want, we give them what they need, blah 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 blah. No, we're going to give you what we think you want. Period. Why? Because you're paying $4 American an issue. That's why. We don't want to play games with you. Are we going to throw you off a little bit? Do we want to maybe push the envelope? Do we like a little drama? Are we going to tease you with some cool variant covers every now and then? Are we going to rack up the spec market? Are we going to mislead in some of our solicits? Absolutely, because that's part of the drama and the joy of collecting comic books. You want to keep people on the edge. But at the end of the day, the idea here is that you got to keep the readership happy and you got to respond to the market. And, I don't think there's enough of that. And I think there's too many games being played and there's too many egos that are taking precedent over common business sense. And thank God they hired us, because we can finally right this ship.
Yeah. And here's the thing. There are always mitigating circumstances. If people, there are a lot of things out there that have occurred throughout comic book continuity that readers don't really know that they want yet, until you give it to them. There's a lot out there like that. I mean, people probably didn't know they wanted Wally West to be Flash, and then they got it, and Wally West was Flash. So I think that there's also that circumstance to where we will make decisions, even if we don't know you want it yet, but we know you will once you have it. You know, something too in the chat. Tevye Smoko says destroying the emotional spectrum again, like the New 52, really would be really awful. Look at Relic. I don't think they destroyed the emotional spectrum though. And I mean the emotional spectrum was threatened based on creating stakes in a story, but they never got rid of the
no, he never. I don't think he's saying they did destroy it. He's talking about would we. They asked the question of me if the one guy asked the question of me if I would destroy it. At one point, I did actually a whole video on why I didn't like the emotional spectrum. He might be referring to that, but that's a topic for another day. You and I can debate that at some point. Dark Knight. I'm not a fan of the emotional spectrum. I think it falls apart for different reasons, but I fully admit it's a fantastic.
Well, I think it doesn't fall apart on the merits of the emotional spectrum. It falls apart on the merits of editorial.
Well,
and I think just knowing that we're executive editors, I think we would hire competent people to consolidate and make sure that it makes sense, because that is one of the primary responsibilities of an editor who works in a continuity-based line of storytelling.
I will say this, but then we're going to move on to Hawkman. We're going to move on to Hawkman after this. I'll just say this to sort of end this, because we need to. I don't want to get too far off topic. That I think it's important that the emotional spectrum should be at least as well developed as the Infinity Stones are, or the Infinity Stones / gems in the Marvel Universe. And I think there's more work to be done on the emotional spectrum to make it even better, because it should be something that should be part of the defining things of the DC universe, just like the Infinity Stones and gems were in the Marvel Universe. Unlike the abysmal failure of the 7 forces of the creation that Scott Snyder had in Justice League, that he himself doesn't even know what the hell they are. He can name them, but he can't even describe them. But that's it for another day. We don't have to worry about that. He's not working here anymore. We can move on. So
quick thing. I didn't know we were doing Hawkman.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll jump right to Justice League.
Because we've done Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern.
Oh no, then we'll do Batman then.
Okay.
We haven't done Batman.
Batman, I kind of I cheated. I definitely cheated a little bit. My pick for Batman is somebody who up until recently was not writing DC titles, but he also has been writing for Marvel for years now. And that's Tom Taylor. I picked Tom Taylor to write Batman. And I acknowledge it's a little bit of a cheat because he is doing Suicide Squad right now, and he just had Deceased. But he's not like a full-on DC guy. In fact, I think for a number of the last couple of years, he's majoritarily recognized as a Marvel guy. And I think that Tom Taylor, is just excellent in capturing how multifaceted some of these characters are and why exactly they're so iconic. Tom Taylor's proven himself writing Batman in Injustice and in various one-shot issues. And I think that he would do an excellent job capturing the brutish detective, but also realizing that for somebody who is considered the biggest loner in comics, he is the biggest extended family. And there's a reason for that, because Batman is a family guy. Hot fucking take. Batman is a family guy. And one of the things that drives him now more than ever is his love for his family. And I think that that is one of the biggest issues that people have not respected Batman's love for his family in recent continuity. And I think Tom Taylor would do an excellent job at preserving that emotionally stunted man who wants to love. Yeah. I think Tom Taylor would do an excellent job. And on art, I would get Mike Deodato, because Mike Deodato is excellent on every single front. Deodato is very smooth at his rendering, to where you can tell this is comic book art, but it has so many different aspects of realism. Mm-hmm. Aside from the fact that he is one of the best panel layout artists in the business. Say what you want about Original Sin. in terms of the story.
Yeah.
Visually, that story was stunning, and Mike Deodato knocked that out of the park. And I think for Batman, there are two very different dynamics in terms of how you want to capture Batman visually that work for me. And it's either comic book realism-esque, that type of illustrative work, or something more along the lines of a David Mazzucchelli, very flat colors, very blocked tones in that nature. And Mike Deodato would do the prior and just kind of bring this aspect of realism and the smooth shading that he applies to his art, I think would be absolutely incredible. Aside from the fact that, again, he's really good at capturing motion and making comic books overall feel like cinema on the screen. I mean, on the page.
Great choice. I love Mike Deodato. I remember him back as an artist back on Wonder Woman. Back on Wonder Woman issues 84 through 89, a classic run where Artemis showed up. And anyways, he's a great artist. Tom Taylor, you know what? If you'd have Tom Taylor's the one guy where we disagreed respectfully earlier about maybe how we would approach a long epic. But I mean, if honestly, if you'd have said Tom Taylor, you would have won the argument, because upon reflection, look at his Injustice. Tom Taylor pretty much single-handedly created what is arguably the single greatest comic book series of the decade. Tom Taylor's Injustice was on many people's #1 list for best comic book of the decade, of the big two, Injustice. It really is incredible. What is it, 4 or 5 seasons of Injustice? And Tom Taylor has a pretty good, he structured Injustice like a season. Each individual, it was year 1, year 2. So it was episodic. It was like watching a TV show. And that's how he structured Injustice. And it really got you involved in the characters. And his characterizations of Harley Quinn, of Black Canary, of Green Arrow, of Superman, or of Batman, how he made these characters go so completely outside their comfort zone and their traditional character wheelhouse, and really got you involved in their characters, and you felt like you knew them. To this day, if you talk to lots of lay people that don't read a lot of comic books, a lot of them will have read Injustice, and they love it. And it's accessible, and guess what? It actually has an ending. Mm-hmm. It's the best TV shows are the ones that you can only watch. For example, if you watch Breaking Bad on TV and you just watch the first 3 seasons, you can still get satisfaction out of it and feel like you got some measure of enjoyment out of it, even though you didn't watch it to the very, very end of the 7th or 8th season or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. That's what comic books should feel like. But comic books don't feel that way anymore. They feel that way less and less. But Tom Taylor's the one exception that you just identified, that he can make it look like he nails it. And he's also capable of doing the one-shot special like he did with a Spider Bite. That Spider Bite issue with Spider-Man, and the one kid was dying of leukemia. He goes to the hospital. It was a heartfelt issue. Tugged at the heartstrings. This guy's Tom Taylor's the total package, and like you said, he's the chameleon. He's sort of like, he works for Marvel, he works for DC. It's like he's waiting for the highest bidder. I tell you what, you and I, man, we got to pin him down. We got to get him to an exclusive.
Oh, for 100%. And again, the thing about Batman, and one of the reasons why I love the character so much, wow, what a graphic, is that I think Batman is by far the most versatile character in all of comic books. There are so many different directions that you can take Batman. You can bring him out into the Justice League, and you can have the man triumphing over gods. You can have Batman on the street. You can have Batman tackling organized crime. You can have Batman tackling occultists arising in the city. You can have Batman tackle building a family. You can have Batman do anything. And Tom Taylor has proven a level of versatility, not only on that more genre-based front, but emotionally. Batman is a complex character that nobody seems to get half the time. Because people tend to have a very narrow vision of the character. And especially like looking at Injustice, Batman was one of his leads. And look at how well he handled that. I mean, one of the most heartbreaking things was watching his conflict with Damian after you find out that Damian killed Dick. Yeah. Because of because Batman puts up this wall. A lot of writers assume that he doesn't feel. And that is the fucking tragedy of Batman, is that he feels it all and he keeps it back there behind the wall. And I think Tom Taylor would do an excellent job at crafting that while also being able to deliver crazy comic book storytelling. We're going to have Batman fight the wily, insane, colorful characters in his rogues gallery. We're going to have Batman be one of the best martial artists in the DC universe. Tom Taylor is able to capture that versatility so well. And again, I can't stress enough his ability to capture that level of emotion that the character contains, because a lot of people will sacrifice that for the expense of the badass character, and Batman is both. And then again, Deodato just having just the way that he sets up a page, I think, is absolutely incredible. It feels cinematic. The way that he renders just establishes depth. Also, as my beat artist is Marco Cacchetto, once again, currently doing Daredevil. I think Cacchetto would be excellent for maybe those 2 or 3 story filler arcs amongst the run, but I would like to have Mark Deodato as the one doing the 5 or 6 larger, more impactful arcs. But I think that Tom Taylor and Batman is a match made in heaven.
My choice for Batman was very different than yours. I actually, honestly, I never thought of Tom Taylor for some reason I thought of him as more Marvel. So I never actually picked him for any, but to be honest, he's easily one of my top 3 writers, period, Tom Taylor right now, particularly for DC. But in any event, for Batman, I chose Jason Aaron, and the artist I chose Joe Bennett. And the reason why I chose Jason Aaron is because when I think Jason Aaron can really bring a hardcore Batman. Jason Aaron writes a series called Southern Bastards. It's an Image series, Southern Bastards. It's very hardcore. It's about an old coach who's sort of involved in the mafia. He's the coach of a football team in the southern United States, and it's really hardcore. It's very redneck, and it's brutal in its violence and brutal in its characterization, and it's no holds barred. And I think Jason Aaron could bring a hardcore, visceral, violent aspect to Batman that we could see a side of Batman where we could see more of the criminal side, more of the hardcore blood and gut side of Batman, that not necessarily all the detective work. But the fact of the matter is that you can say Batman prepares a lot and that he's a brilliant detective, but at the end of the day, he still has to get his ass kicked, and he still does a lot of ass kicking. And you can be the smartest guy in the room, but if you don't know how to fight and if you're outnumbered, you're dead. And the smartest argument doesn't win when you're outnumbered. And you need more. Sometimes you need more than intelligence. And I know, obviously Batman is known for, the fact that he's almost never the most powerful person in the room. That's why he wins, because people underestimate him. He can be in the presence of superpowered beings and still win. And that's what makes Batman so special. He prepares. Jason Aaron, I think, has the right sort of background to write Batman. Between writing Thor, he's used to writing mythological characters. He's used to writing viscerally violent, very human, flawed characters, like in Southern Bastards that he wrote for Image. I think he's the perfect fit for Batman. And artist, I picked Joe Bennett because of the violence of Immortal Hulk. I think Joe Bennett would be perfect for the violence that I picture for Batman. Obviously, there's a theme going on here. I'm picturing a more hardcore Batman here, but that's my vision.
I think those are great picks. Jason Aaron was definitely somebody who was meandering in my mind when trying to decide who to place on Batman. I mean, Batman has perhaps one of the greatest mythologies in all of comic books. And what does Jason Aaron do better than mythology? Not to mention, again, you bring up the great point of Southern Bastards, which adds a level of dirt and this grindhouse kind of nature, which is inherently a part of Batman that I think is super important, and I think he would do really well. And Joe Bennett was a great pick. Again, he is an artist of texture. He is the type of artist that would provide these incredible close-up shots of Batman punching somebody's face into a brick wall, and we're going to watch every bone in the face break on one flat image. And I think it would look incredible. So I think that Jason Aaron and Joe Bennett are great picks on Batman. I would love to read a Joe Bennett, Jason Aaron Batman story, or a run for that matter.
Yeah. No, agreed. Well, related to Batman, of course, is Detective Comics. And Detective Comics, I mean, editorially, I think the idea, at least traditionally, is that Detective is always dealing more with, well, actually, I'm not even sure. I mean, it's actually gone back and forth. Batman usually deals more with Batman. Detective Comics has traditionally dealt with more of the Batman family as well. But maybe you'll disagree with me on that. I'm just curious who you picked for Detective Comics.
All right, so for Detective Comics, that's where I decided to put my little bit more gritty grindhouse. We're gonna beat the shit out of people and be big dark detective Batman who lurks in the shadows and scares the piss out of you. I picked Matthew Rosenberg primarily for his incredible run on the Punisher. I don't care about the Punisher, and then I read Matthew Rosenberg's Punisher run, and it was phenomenal. Matthew Rosenberg is excellent at capturing that emotionally tormented character and creating a story that feels intricate, espionage-like, but also incredibly action-packed. And for artists, I gave him Simon Kodransky, who he worked with on that Punisher run. There's something about Simon Kodransky. That guy is not afraid to put blacks in his art in terms of just adding such levels of deep black and letting them block out the screen to establish depth and tone. His rendering style is very smooth, which again is a great part of Batman, but he can also texture super well and set up really, really great cinematic shots. And to me, I feel like every other page in a Batman related comic book should have a cinematic shot. I mean, Batman is just inherently like he takes to that style of visual storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think Simon Kodransky would really play with that. And again, Matthew Rosenberg, solid writer. I think he would capture that kind of gritty grindhouse detective style story that I would be aiming to get and to reinstill back into Detective Comics. And then as a B artist, I threw in Leinil Francis Yu. I think that he just has this really, it's not realism. It is very inherently comic book, this very block and hard edge kind of anatomy to characters that I think, again, with this tone that I'd be going for in Detective Comics, I think he would capture it really well. He's really great, not necessarily in his page layouts, but making things feel dynamic in the way he's composing singular images in sequence rather than maybe, the way you're orienting those single images on the page. So, yeah, I think that would be a really interesting run of Detective Comics.
I like your choice of Lionel Francis Yu. I've Yu's got he's got a lot of experience doing Marvel epic events. I mean, he's definitely paid his dues. I first became familiar with him when he did Mark Waid's Superman Birthright back in the day. That was his big break. And honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of his work on Birthright, but the guy only kept getting better and better and better. If you look at his work on Birthright, Superman Birthright, the guy didn't draw women very well. His backgrounds are non-existent. Then you compare that to his work at Marvel, and
Captain America.
The reason why Marvel gave him all the big jobs and all the epic events that they did, he's done multiple titles and work with Marvel because he's earned it, because he's perfected his craft and he keeps getting better. And that's a really good choice. And like you said, it fits Detective Comics. It fits the Batman character. It really does. So that's a really good choice. I can't, again, hard to disagree here. It's like we both love fruit and we got to choose between an apple and an orange. So it's like,
yeah,
what do you do? But,
so Boom, what are you thinking? What's your direction for Detective Comics?
I went so different than you on this. A little bit of an outlier here, maybe, I think, but I thought that because I was thinking that my Detective Comics would be focus a little bit more on the Batman family, not just Batman, a little bit more on Damian as well, in particular, and the relationship between Damian and Batman. And so I went with Nick Spencer, who does Amazing Spider-Man, and I know that Nick Spencer is sort of a mixed bag with some people because they still hold ill feelings with his Secret Empire. I actually enjoyed Secret Empire. I actually don't blame Nick Spencer for Secret Empire. I actually think that he did an amazing job with Secret Empire. He had to work with so many moving parts and so many different writers and artists with Secret Empire at Marvel. And for an artist, I put Luke Ross. But if you want to know what Luke Ross has done, his latest work was on Star Wars Allegiance. I'm just showing it here. It's amazing if you look at his art. Just fantastic. I wanted to find, Luke Ross is an amazing artist. Attention to detail is just fantastic. And background's amazing. And I think for Nick Spencer is really good at characterization. His Amazing Spider-Man right now. He's good at characterization. He's good at telling a longer narrative. It's a little mixed bag right now. I think he's lost some steam with Amazing Spider-Man, so I think he'd welcome writing Detective Comics. So we're just gonna, we're gonna pay him the same page rates or the same script rate, whatever you might call it. So he's gonna be happy because go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily let Nick Spencer near my Batman, but I think it's an interesting pick. The one thing, sorry, that just like felt like a punch in the face in the comments. Wow, with a Z. My creative team would be Zoe Quinn and Rob Liefeld.
Writing what?
Detective Comic, or he said for Batman. I feel like that's an easy way to get two different sized ears on the same cowl.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Zoe Quinn is. The last thing I read from Zoe Quinn was I read her Vertigo series. I actually own it. I bought every issue of it because I'll be blunt. It was speculation. I wasn't a big fan of it. I never understood it. It dealt with a lot with computers and computer viruses, and I forget what it was called. But I actually bought all 6 issues because I thought she might be an up and coming writer. She might, she's a very controversial writer. I know she's got a lot of drama in her past that I'm not going to go into. But Rob Liefeld. You know what? Remember the Rob Liefeld story? Remember when we were near Comic-Con? Quick story. I ran into Rob Liefeld. I'm waiting in line at the bathroom at New York Comic-Con in October 2019. I'm there with Dark Knight. We're separated. I got to go take a leak. I go into the lineup. Who's the guy standing in front of me? Rob Liefeld. I said to him, I said, do you mind if I get a selfie with you? Instead of telling me to go screw myself, he was a nice enough guy to he just sort of chuckled. He said, sure. And I got a selfie with Rob Liefeld in the lineup to the bathroom at New York Comic-Con. Great guy. Do I want to see him drawing Batman? No.
Tubi, you know what the funny story was? I was the one that told Rob Liefeld that he didn't have to wait in line. You remember? Because I was already in the bathroom and you were all lining up, and I was like, oh, they just formed the line like outside of the bathroom. Like, there's no line for the urinals. And then like he just went in, and then I walked out and I was like, that was Rob Liefeld. And then you were like, yeah, I just got a picture with him. And I was like, what the fuck?
That's right, because I think there was a separate lineup for the guys taking a number 2 as opposed to a number 1. And
yeah.
some guys who had to go number 1 were in the wrong lineup for number 2.
Yep. Yeah, no, because everybody thought it was just a line to get into the bathroom. Yeah, so that was a funny story. Yeah, Rob Liefeld seems like an okay guy. I think that he overinflates himself. And I wouldn't let him go near Batman. But continuing on, do we have I think let's talk about your pick for detective. It was Nick Spencer, and Who was the artist again?
Luke Ross. He does Star Wars Allegiance. Luke Ross is very good. That's where I came familiar with him. I'm holding it up here. He's a exceptionally good artist. And if you're not familiar with him, all I can say is check him out. I'm holding up some of his images here. It's extremely detailed.
I just looked up his Instagram.
Yeah, he's a really good artist, and I think that, quite frankly, I think he'd be amazing. He's really good at action sequences. He's just really good at it. He's really good at action sequences and the layouts and the he's got almost like a photorealistic take to his imagery, and it's really good, and he can convey it with and his transition into action sequences and the layout of the pages. It was really good. Now I just figured, again, I wanted to do something a little bit outside the norm. I think it's important as an editor-in-chief that I go outside my comfort zone once in a while. And so I figured that Nick Spencer and Luke Ross, that's sort of a, I think that's one of those things where you never know, you never know if something feels right until you go outside your comfort zone type of reasoning there.
Yeah, I really like his art. I think it would be an interesting pick for Batman. I mean, I get the direction you were going in. I would have even debated putting Nick Spencer on like a Teen Titans or a Young Justice book instead of Batman. But or instead of Detective. But I don't think it's something that I would immediately, totally, try to turn down. I think it's a weird pick. But I'm not totally opposed to giving somebody like that a shot, just because, a lot of the times a writer needs to be on the right book. I mean,
I should say, I just want to quickly add that Nick Spencer wrote Morning Glories, which was a very acclaimed independent title from Image. Morning Glories, about a school of young women, and it's very well done. And I think I'd like to see him. I would even ask him to incorporate some aspects of Gotham Academy, and I'd also be bringing back Gotham Academy series as well. And I'd have Nick Spencer write that in conjunction with Detective, because he's really good. He's good at capturing young voices, and I think that again, I think that's in his wheelhouse right now, and I think that I think his Amazing Spider-Man is better. It's going to probably stand the test of time. It's going to. I think people are going to appreciate his Spider-Man run more so in the future than they do presently.
I mean, I think it's bad, but hey. I think he was better at the Sinister Foes of Spider-Man because there's way less pressure and it gave him more room to play. But I think the most interesting topic of conversation brought up by our pal Joe from Joe's Geek Show is seeing Rob Liefeld drawing Batman's feet. Now that would be a spectacle.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest draft of this entire occasion. But I think we finished up our list,
we
right?
did. We finished, and now, well, we were going to deal with Teen Titans.
Yeah, so that was the book where I think I could see Nick Spencer on, personally. But I would throw Chip Zdarsky on there. That's because that's not part of our original list. That's where I would double dip. I think Chip Zdarsky is great at writing, again, ensembles. I think it's very important to find a writer that can distinguish characters through dialogue and get them right at the same time.
Yeah.
Some of the best writers in the industry can't do that, so that's no knock. And it's, on anybody. I think one of the biggest issues that nobody talks about in Scott Snyder's Justice League is generally the dialogue is not good because he doesn't understand the speech patterns or the way that these characters express themselves through speech very well, except for maybe 3 characters in the cast. And I think Zdarsky's proven himself, whether it be, playing around with the Marvel 2-in-1 or Invaders. I think he would do a great job. And I think it was somebody in the chat brought up a really interesting lineup that I actually wouldn't mind, giving my stamp of approval on. I want to give them the credit. I don't remember if it was Tevye or Maverick, but somebody had brought up a Teen Titans run with Wally's kids, Jay, and I think Iris, along with Damian and John. I think that would be a really interesting core lineup for the Teen Titans, and I think Chip Zdarsky would write the hell out of that dynamic. And art-wise, I think this artist is a really mixed bag because I think his anatomy is absolutely horrible, and I think sometimes he hits some really big blunders. But I think Humberto Ramos would really capture that youthful spirit of a Teen Titans run, and I think would be a really interesting artist, and does have a level of dynamic visual storytelling to him.
I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that. The only reason wouldn't put Chip Zdarsky on is because because I've already hired somebody else.
And that would be
and because the other artist already signed and a deal's a deal. But I went for Teen Titans. There's a backstory to this. Let me tell you something. There's one guy out there. There's a writer out there that is filled and riddled with controversy, but I believe was a fantastic writer and was born for DC Comics, and that's Mark Waid. I'm going to say it. The guy knows Superman better than anyone, and nobody wrote Young Justice better than Mark Waid. It was hilarious. It was funny. It was a joy to read. Mark Waid himself has said in interviews that he'll never return to DC Comics until Dan Didio is fired. Well, Mark, guess what happened, buddy? It's your lucky day. And you're looking at the two guys that are going to get you a job, and we're going to double what you get paid at Marvel. Mark Waid's currently writing Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, or Surgeon Supreme right now, and it's with mixed reviews. It's not Mark Waid's not eating up the charts. He's got a lawsuit he's dealing with. I don't want to bring any of that garbage up. I'm just focusing on Mark Waid, the writer. I think he's very good. He knows his Superman now, and he knows his Young Justice. I would put Mark Waid on Young Justice, and I would want it to be co-written by not Kelly Thompson, Scotty Young. Scotty Young's doing the covers, and he's going to have an 8-page backup story in it. Scotty Young, Mark Waid writing Young Justice. It's an absolute no-brainer. There's a huge spec market for Scotty Young variant covers. I think it's important to capitalize on that. Scotty Young does Fairyland, that image by image.
I hate Fairyland.
Pushes the envelope. He's got a cult following. He pushes the envelope. I think that Mark Waid knows so much. Mark Waid, even though he works for Marvel, has forgotten more about DC continuity than you or I or anybody else will ever know. This is the guy that we want to get him back, because Mark Waid understands the essence of rebirth. In fact, everyone talks about Jeff Johns. Let me tell you about the hidden gem that nobody talks about, and that's Mark Waid. You can talk about it. People talk about him being mentally ill, talk about his laws. I don't care about any of that. That's the baggage. Okay.
I don't think Mark Waid is necessarily a hidden gem. I just think that the time for people talking about him is over. There was a time for it, and I think that was,
But he hasn't been publishing. He hasn't been published by DC Comics in a while, and I believe he still has greatness in him. And I, as executive editor, I would argue with you, my friend, and I would want him to be given a chance to shine again at DC, because I still think he's got greatness in him. And this is the guy who wrote the greatest comic book story ever told, Kingdom Come.
I don't think you're wrong in your pick. Let me put that out there. I think it's a good pick. And I think that if you're going to give Mark Waid a chance, an opportunity to climb his way back to the top, I think Teen Titans is a great book to put him on, because they represent or Young Justice, either way, pretty much the same thing. They represent the legacy of the DC universe. And if anybody knows the DC universe, it is Mark Waid. I think it's a great pick. I do. I will say that I don't think Mark Waid has obviously ever amounted to the same level of success at Marvel that he has at DC. Could be just because of fondness of the characters. It could just be he's getting older and he's not as good as he used to be. Who knows? But I think that putting him on Teen Titans is a risk that I'd be willing to take. I think putting Scotty Young on backups and variant covers, I think, is very intuitive of the market. I think it would work visually. I think it would work tonally. I think that that was just a really solid pairing to put together. I mean, art wise, man, I mean, there's a million people out there. I still think it's a shame that they never left Robson Roca on the title. He did a lot of Kelly Sue DeConnick's Aquaman. He did that first anniversary special where everybody thought Robin shot Black Mask. I think that he would be a great Teen Titans artist. He's at DC, so I guess he's not really like a major option. But I think even though picking like a Pepe Larraza or an RB Silva for a Young Justice Teen Titans run with Mark Waid would be great.
Yeah. No, for sure. Who'd you pick
For Teen Titans?
Yeah.
I picked Zdarsky and Humberto Ramos.
Sorry, yeah, I'm staring here. I thought I wrote it down, but I didn't. Oh yeah, I wrote here as an aside. If we were going to put that on, if I was going to put Mark Waid on Teen Titans, I was going to, if Mark Waid's going to do Teen Titans or Young Justice, I was going to have Scotty Young do the other one. You know, so Scotty Young can do Young Justice, and Mark Waid do Teen Titans or whatever. I think I love what DC had. Scotty Young has become what we used to have the Gotham. We used to have a Gotham title with, was it Nugent? Who's the artist? It was he draws. He did the he did the animated. He did a. I'm trying to think. Sorry. I'm drawing blank. I'm drawing the. I think it's Nugent. Was the artist for wasn't Gotham Central, it was Gotham, not Gotham Academy. It was sort of like an animated, it was a kids animated series, but he's gone on to different things for different things. He's got a young adult. DC is publishing a young adult title of his, a young adult series where he's the artist. And I can't remember it. I'll think of it, but in any event, well, we'll move along. Obviously, my crown is getting to me. At this point, we wanted to keep this under 2 hours. It's we're at 1 hour and 46 minutes here. Now I think we've got we might as well use up the next 14 minutes. Dark Knight. We got wild cards here. What about wild card picks?
Well, we're missing one big title.
What's that?
We're missing one big title.
Oh, that's right. We are. And that's Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you better start us off. I totally forgot.
I think my pick for Justice League is probably my most obvious pick. And without a doubt in my mind, I would put Jonathan Hickman on Justice League.
I did the same thing. Take it away, brother.
I think putting anybody else on Justice League without giving him a shot first would be foolish.
Absolutely.
Because the big thing that Justice League has lacked is the ability for a writer to tell large universe, even multiverse spanning epics and have it make sense. Hickman is a master at the long game of comics, and with something like Justice League, he makes those things pay off. I think his Avengers was spectacular. He single-handedly got me into Marvel Comics through his Avengers, through his Fantastic Four, the Infinity, the stuff in Infinity that he did with Jim Chung and Jerome Pena. By the way, my artist is Jerome Pena, no doubt. Nobody draws epic scale stuff like him. I think he's absolutely incredible. Fine detail, excellent rendering of depth, and action and layout and composition. Jonathan Hickman is just a master world builder, and Justice League should always be on the forefront of the DC universe in a positive way. And that's something we haven't seen in a very long time. Scott Snyder was a run that I was very excited for. You know that. I know that. But I think Scott Snyder's run, as do you, and maybe for some of the same and some different reasons, I think it was a failure.
Yeah.
I think it had very, very good ambitions with no follow through. And if anybody is going to have the ability to execute and follow through on large scale, broad ambitions, it's Jonathan Hickman. And I think he would do it with nuance and he would do it with a lot of grace. So, no doubt in my mind, if I'm giving any big Marvel writer a shot at Justice League to be the impetus behind change in the universe, it's Jonathan Hickman. And the best part is, I wouldn't have to pay for expensive editors because he knows what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I got to say, and just as a compliment to Jonathan Hickman, I've never been an X-Men fan, and I'm still not a huge X-Men reader, but I can't impress upon people enough when I say that I was never really an X-Men fan. I really appreciated the love and the passion that Hickman brought to House of X and Powers of X. He brought so much substance to it. Every time I bought an issue of Powers of X and House of X, there were 6 issues long each, 6 issues of Powers of X, 6 issues of House of X. Each individual issue was so rich and filled with substance and exposition and explanatory notes. It really it was I took the time to read it, and I actually became fascinated and interested in it, and I could understand the gist of it enough that I read enough comic books to know that, you know what, I felt like a 7-year-old again, reading comics for the first time, wanting to know more, because unlike a lot of comic book readers, people would be stunned. I've been reading comic books for like 43 years, and I really don't know a lot about the X-Men. I've never been a fan of the X-Men. It shocks some people, but it's just one of those things. I was never a fan of the X-Men. Jonathan Hickman made me actually want to know a little bit more about the substance, more of the details of the X-Men. And Jonathan Hickman himself has stated that he would love to write Justice League one day. He himself has publicly stated the same. And now that you and I, finally two competent individuals like Dark Knight, myself, we're finally running DC Comics, we're obviously going to extend the invitation. We're going to pay whatever he wants. And, I can guarantee you that at the New York Comic Con 2020, Dark Knight and I are going to put on a better presentation than the one Didio put on in 2019. I'm just saying. Figure if I'm going to go to New York, I might as well pretend that people actually want to be there. I might actually dress for the occasion. Seriously, come on.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
Something I want to approach in the chat. Paulo Costas' Avengers is Hickman's least interesting piece in his body of work. It lacked direction. I don't think it lacked direction at all. I think the beautiful thing about Hickman is that it covered such a wide spread and broadened the cosmic mythology and the essential creation myth of Marvel in such a fantastic way. I think that I would argue any day of the week that Hickman's Avengers leading into Infinity and coming out of Infinity was excellent. Just because it doesn't have one narrow vision, I don't think means it lacked direction. I think he was able to accomplish something that not a lot of writers in comics can, and develop and it's generally, the term world building in comics, but Hickman went far and beyond that and literally built a universe,
right.
And developed something and reimagined the Marvel universe in such a profoundly innovative way. So with all due respect, Paulo Costa, I would argue a very different stand on Hickman's Avengers. And I think, again, what Avengers are modeled in a way after the Justice League. I would 100% give him a shot.
Well, I would, but I'm gonna Paulo Costa. First of all, hi Paulo, nice to see you. I direct message with Paulo from time to time. He's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable about comic books.
No knock towards him. He seems very well spoken and very knowledgeable.
No, I don't disagree with you, Dark Knight. Actually, I'm taking a middle ground approach. The truth is that Hickman's Avengers, I thought, was way too long. It really was. It led into Secret Wars, but even though it was too long, at least because I had been reading it, everything added up. The plot lines were resolved. There was satisfaction at the end with the Fantastic Four, with Mr. Fantastic going out into the multiverse, you know, exploring, becoming like there was a satisfaction to it, a deep satisfaction to it. And I wasn't even a deep Marvel zombie, and I enjoyed it. It had a payoff, at least with a 3-year commitment. And Avengers under Hickman is a 3-year commitment. And I want to be clear on this. I agree with Paulo. None of this 3-year crap. I don't want a 3-year storyline. I don't want that. I don't want that. And I realize, Dark Knight, you and I might, maybe we'll disagree on that. But I just feel that, I think we owe it to readers in this day and age. We live in a day and age where people lack patience, and it's not our job to teach them patience. It's our job to cater to the customer.
I think that's the case where you
got a storyline for 3 years.
I think that's the case where you concentrate Hickman, right? I think the big issue is that with Hickman's status, right? If you're coming to me to work for me at DC, I would at that point not constrain his writing, but make a point at saying you need to be more conscious of pace. If you want to do big, grandiose stories.
I would put it another way, Dark Knight. I would say we challenge him, saying, "Look, you got a great idea here, but let's, we're not going to do this for 36 issues." Bear in mind, Hickman's Avengers was like 36 issues of Avengers and 36 issues of there was 2 Avengers titles, and so it was actually 72 issues. It was insane, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there was some degree of satisfaction to it, but I mean, we have to look as editors in chief. We have to look at trying to broaden the market here. And I know that might be ridiculous to say that there's anybody out there trying to expand the comic book market, but we have to look forward to a day where there's more than just a core group of aging comic book guys like us. Now, I know you're younger than I am, but we have to keep the base alive. And, Hickman is genius. The guy's at genius level, but I mean, we got to, I would do my best to reel him in and encourage him to keep things concise as hell, and just keep things tight, because I mean, like I say, the guy's a genius and he's got great ideas, but at the same time, I think that his Avengers title near the end there, it got divisive. If it wasn't for Secret Wars paying off a little bit, I think I mean, he left and he came back, but now with X-Men, even now with X-Men, the criticism of X-Men is that it's not ending. It just changed the status quo.
Yeah, but here's the thing about Secret Wars. I mean, all I ever hear about it is that he wanted to do it way ahead of the time that they let him do it. So I don't think him leaving and coming back was a product of his negligence or his inability. And also, I want to address the comment that Paulo makes. He says that Hickman didn't direct the story in a direction that allowed the heroes to overcome. That doesn't mean it lacked direction. That's not how story works. The heroes don't need to overcome the most immediate obstacle at hand. A story is not defined by the hero always winning. It is the journey. The end has to have a conclusion, and it doesn't always have to be satisfactory. That's how story works. Story doesn't mean the heroes always win. And it's good if they do, if they win on the broad front, but victories don't always mean them winning in the same front. The victory in and of itself could be learning and developing as a character. I mean, if you watch, for example, I'm sure most people in the audience have seen Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Are you going to say that's not an excellent movie because the ending is very uncomfortable? The ending of that film is very uncomfortable and is not traditional at all. Yeah. You don't know why certain things happened at the end of that film, but you know what? It was a damn good film because that journey took us on a ride and made us think. So I don't think that. I mean, I would even argue it as fact that it doesn't mean that he has a lack of direction because it wasn't a way in which the heroes could win immediately. And I would personally tie in his time on Secret Wars to his Avengers because it is part of his broad narrative.
I would absolutely. I view Secret Wars as, and I'm not a Marvel zombie, but I viewed Secret Wars as really the story of the Fantastic Four. Because it really became a Fantastic Four story at the end with the Fantastic Four family going off into the universe, creating new universes. And it wasn't until Chip Zdarsky's Marvel 2-in-1 where they sort of there was a hint of them coming back, and then them finally coming back with Dan Slott's Fantastic Four. So no, it was I really think ultimately we're on the same page. And it's kind of funny because when you have such a major epic, it's one of those things where, and I think we're both in the same boat but we can disagree on how we got there. And that is that we can both agree that Hickman's Avengers run into Secret Wars was really good. We can look back in hindsight, but I got to tell you, at the time, waiting for every issue to come out, and then knowing you had to wait another 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 months before you got a resolution, it's very frustrating. The journey itself becomes frustrating. And let me put my point this way, and I think this is the struggle that we're going to have as editor-in-chief, Dark Knight. This is the struggle that we're going to have in trying to satisfy fans, and that is this. We want to make the journey enjoyable and fun and epic so they keep coming back. We don't want to make the journey satisfying, and that the only satisfying part of the journey is the destination. And the best comic book stories, when you tell episodic tales, when you tell issue by issue tales, is, there's nothing worse than a writer, in my view, that says, well, don't worry, just wait, be patient. Well, no. What do you mean? Can't I enjoy every issue?
And that's not just
every issue that, just wait. I'm giving you what you need, not what you want, or this. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, and I realize that only the best writers can deliver this, but this is what we as editors-in-chief have to strive for in our writers, is that every single issue there should be something there so they keep coming back. And that's not always what we're getting right now. Certainly not with current DC. We're getting disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, and we keep getting. And now we're supposed to. Don't worry, 5G is coming. 5G is coming. I don't even know if I want 5G. What am I supposed to look forward to? So we go to 5G and what? And we're going to have the same writers that are causing the problems in the first place solve the problems that we already have. You can't solve a problem with the parts that make up the problem in the first place. This is my frustration. I mean, it might be a little bit of the crown talking right now, but this is what, we're talking hypothetically with us as editors-in-chief, but I'm just venting, but this is my concern. And it's like this idea that, just be patient and wait. Well, no, we live in a day and age where maybe the writers need to realize that maybe start writing to the impatient audience as opposed to expect the audience to be patient and wait for you to get your story together.
Or just be smart and plan ahead of time. Like I think the big thing with Hickman is that they're not letting him remove himself far enough for a time being that he can execute and his artist can execute something in bulk. Like for me, I think the best way to handle Hickman, rather than having, for example, a year-long event of 12 issues, why don't we do an 8-month-long event or a 6-month-long event and do oversized issues and get that story? Because the thing about Hickman is he always reads better in trade, just by the nature of the industry.
Yeah.
So why don't we play to that strength? Otherwise, again, we challenge Hickman to re-economize the way he's telling stories, because he's a great storyteller. He's a great world builder. Yeah. He's great at characterization. And he's a very smart writer. I saw somebody saying that he tries to wax philosophical, but you didn't understand. Maybe that's on you for not understanding. Because the inherent talent of a good writer to play theme into their writing is to not be explicit about it. My biggest complaint, for example, of Scott Snyder currently is that he will literally sit there and scream the theme at my face. I don't want you to tell me explicitly what this story is about. I want to read it and have my interpretation, and that's what Hickman does.
You make an excellent point, Dark Knight. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate how you articulated that, because it's so true. First of all, I want to say Scott Snyder is a class act. I can't give higher compliments to a writer than Scott Snyder, because he confronts criticism. He direct messaged me from Twitter. He found, he discovered, when he read, I was disappointed with Justice League 39. He's not afraid of criticism, constructive criticism, and he confronts me and he defends his point of view, and that's wonderful, and that's something that I would want our writers to do, and all the power to him. But you're absolutely right that the idea that you have to be able to, when you write a story, at some level, when you and even in the legal profession of which I am a part, there's an old cliche expression that if or there, let me just quote from Shakespeare a bit: "Methinks that thou protest too much." When you defend yourself too much, you just might be guilty of a little bit.
Yeah.
If you got to defend a story too much, you maybe failed in what you were trying to do in the first place.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the nicest way. I mean that to all writers, and I'm talking as obviously a guy who reads it. I'm talking as a fan here, But I shouldn't have to repeatedly ask 12 different questions to try to figure out what you were trying to say. And I should be able. There's nothing better, and I wish I could remember the quote. You'd love it because it's right up your alley. But it's along the lines that the best stories are the ones where different people get different conclusions from the story.
Yep.
Because isn't that what story is about? Where stories speak to you at your level and what you want to get out of it. Isn't it wonderful that one story can reach different people in different ways? That's the brilliance of story when it's done right. And we don't see a lot of that anymore.
Specifically with these iconic characters, the beautiful thing about them is they have built up such a mythology and such an image to them that millions of people love them for so many different reasons. Some of them are perpendicular. Some of those reasons do meet. I'm sure Boom and I love a lot of the same characters for a lot of the same reasons, but we also love them for totally separate reasons. And that's the beautiful thing about how iconic these characters are. Because you put good talent that cares on them and they flourish. And that's what's made them so iconic in the first place. Often the best writing is invisible. And I think that's 100% true. Nuance is invisible. Nuance is the thing that makes me ramble in these videos, that I when I try to explain why I like something so much and I just can't, because there's just something so inherently great about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important. And I think that that's something that we took into consideration when we made our picks for these drafts.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that at the end of the day, it was Boom and I coming up to this Herculean task of restaffing the DC universe with writers from Marvel that we think would care ultimately and have the ability to execute solid storytelling. And obviously we picked them individually for different titles because of their individual subset of skills, but ultimately because they are solid storytellers. And because they abide by a lot of the things that we were talking about prior, because they're able to create stories that mean different things to different people, because the nuance was something that we were blind to a certain degree. They were things that we couldn't particularly describe. So, at the end of the day, I think all in all, I think we had a very successful venture into our Marvel fantasy draft to DC Comics.
Oh, I agree. I'm just making a comment to Paul Costa there. He makes the comment, or Tevye Smolka makes the comment again, why not hire new editorial teams instead of outsourcing our characters?
I'm ready.
Yeah, there you go. Is that something you're prepared to say publicly at Dark Knight about your background or not?
Oh, what? That I'm trying to work at Marvel? Yeah.
Say something about what your aspirations are and what you're doing right now.
So I didn't realize it, but there he goes, part of my mic. The reason I started making analytical YouTube videos was that I didn't know it at the moment, but what I was essentially doing was verbalizing the thought process of an editor. And I'm actually applying to work at Marvel Editorial. And as much as I think, obviously, I am relatively green to the industry, I think that I will provide a level of passion and a level of care for not only these characters in the universe, but the practice of storytelling. And so for me, at Marvel, there is one good editor, and his name is Will Moss. I think he's very talented. He's been the editor on Immortal Hulk, on the entirety of Jason Aaron's Thor run. He's done parts of Star Wars, under the Jason Aaron Star Wars stuff. He's doing the current Thor. Being an editor is typically a very thankless job. A lot of the time, writers will do things that they might not have done if it weren't for the editor. And the editor can also totally ruin the creative experience that is the collaborative process of creating comic books. But I would like to think that whatever firing they do is before I get there, so that they can keep a job working.
Let me just say this. Look, there's been a lot of talk for the last 3 years, especially with the comic skates versus SJW, and we're not going to go there. But clearly, one of the issues has been who the big two have been hiring as their editorial staff. There's no question. That's the elephant in the room. And the whole issue is hiring editors that don't know the background and don't know the characters, and that don't know what in fact they're doing. They don't know the source material. They don't actually have a passion for the subject matter. They view it more as a, they look to pop culture and they look to politics for guidance as opposed to comic books and to what sells. And that's the frustrating thing about. And so what I'd like to ask you, Dark Knight, if you'd be okay to answer, is do any of those pressures pry on you? Do you feel any of that in your experience so far in wanting to break into the industry? Or how do you process that? Or how does that work for you?
Well, I think the big thing to approach is, and the biggest things that stood out to me in what you just said are not only the knowledge, but a passion for the characters and a passion for the universe and a passion for the art of storytelling, particularly in a medium that is overflowing with potential, that is totally underutilized. And for me, I am primarily more knowledgeable of the DC universe. I do have a fairly good footing of the Marvel universe, but I think the thing is when I take to those characters, I take it with passion. And so I don't worry about not knowing what Stan Lee did in Fantastic Four issue number 15, because if I need to know it, if I'm doing the Fantastic Four, you bet your ass I'm going to go back. I'm going to read those stories and I'm going to figure out why they worked and how I can translate that effectiveness to today's modern storytelling sensibilities. I think for me, no, there is not a pressure. I think honestly, my biggest pressure is I'm afraid I'm going to open my mouth one time and somebody who disagrees with me, who is in power, is going to fire me. If anything, I might be over passionate, but no, I don't think that's a pressure. I think that's actually an added benefit to the prospect of working as an editor in comics, because I want the same things the fans want, because I am a fan. I'm a fan who might have a little bit more know-how than the average fan, but I'm a fan. And all I want to do is do right by these characters and create stories that will last forever. I want to create, I mean, like, by all intents and purposes, I want to be able to churn out stories that people will remember 40 years from now, and it'll be just as present and relevant then as it is now.
I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'm going to say it publicly, that I'm living vicariously through Dark Knight. I already told Dark Knight, and I'll say this again publicly, that I expect him to sign all my Marvel and DC comic books that he will inevitably write, and I expect to sell them on eBay for a lot of money one day. And I expect to retire off the income I earn just by saying I know Dark Knight. So, and the thing is, let me tell you something about passion. And I love the fact that it's rare to meet somebody, because let me tell you something, Dark Knight, because you are rare in that you're actually you're pursuing your dream. And I got to give you credit for that, because, most of us, I'm just a 50-year-old white male, bitching about comics online. You're actually somebody who is dissecting them, constructively criticizing them, and, you've got a vested interest in them, and you want them to succeed, not just for the reasons that I might have, because I enjoy reading them. You want to write them, and you want to bring more people into the field, and your passion is palpable and it's obvious. And I got to say, man, it's always a pleasure listening to your insights, even when you're wrong.
Well, I appreciate it, man. That
I
means a lot.
I could
Although,
complete.
just so that we can air that out, I'm never wrong. I just want you to know that. That doesn't happen. I don't know where you'd ever get that from. But I appreciate that, man. It means a lot. You know, at the end of the day, I think that the industry deserves passion, and I think that there are a lot of really intuitive fans out there that may also be aware of the craft of writing, and not only writing as a general platform, but writing in terms of what we can really do with the opportunity that the graphic medium of comics presents us. It's truly unique in what we can do with it narratively, um, and visually. And I think that once we get somebody into that position who wants to make sure that everybody else knows that's working in those offices, I think that's when you get line-wide success. And it becomes far less temporary that way. So that
Well,
that's something that I will aspire to do as I sit here in my little office space.
Well, on that note, uh, thank you, Dark Knight. We've gone over the limit. It's my fault. We always take turns hosting these things. Dark Knight has a very busy life. I do too. We try our best. We love comic books. If we had more time and if we had more time and resources, we would certainly be doing more of these videos. We love talking comic books. Dark Knight, I know that you're doing your studies in university, and you're doing your, you're pursuing your dreams and your goal, and it looks like you're well on your way to doing that. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your insights. Any final words about any final dictates that we didn't? What if you had to have one dictate right now as editor in chief of the new of DC Comics? What would your first dictate be?
Oh, I'm writing Batman. I'm writing Batman, baby.
So you're writing Batman.
Yeah, no, if I can totally make a selfish dictation, boy oh boy, do I have a pitch for a long and strong Batman run. So
I'm writing Cassandra Cain. I'm writing a new Batgirl series. I'm crippling Barbara Gordon. She's Oracle again, and Cassandra Cain is Batgirl by decree. And we're not going to spend 6 months or 36 years getting to the storyline. It's going to happen overnight. It's just going to happen. Boom, done. Get over it.
Comic boom. This is where we at. This is where we see it. Well, at the end of the day, man, thanks for having me on. I'm so glad to be able to get back up into this game and chat some comics. It's literally been months for the most part since I've gotten into the groove of doing this. And what better occasions? I got to sit down with Joey last night. I got to sit down with you tonight.
Yeah,
it's great to be back. If anybody's remotely interested, come check the channel out. I'm back making videos again. I'm sure you can find the link in the description or wherever.
Yeah.
Really, that's the approach that I like to take. When I review comics, I review it almost as a verbal editorial letter, approaching the techniques that the writers and the artists are using that work and some of the stuff that might not work. Ultimately, that's what I do. And then, as much as I can, I like to have wonderful people on, like my guy, Comic Boom, to come and do some fun and irreverent conversational topics. If you look at the backlog, we have a couple of really crazy ones. We talked about like faith and religion and atheism in comics. We talked about hidden gem comic creators. I always pride ourselves on those conversations, Boom. We're talking about comics in a way that I don't think anybody else is on the internet. So that's something that you can only find. And of course, if for some reason you're watching this and you're not subscribed to that guy over there, I guess I don't know what directions I'm going in over there. You're making a mistake, because this guy is one of the best comic book YouTubers on the internet. So
oh man, stop. You're such a yeah. Well, thank you for that. I also want to give a shout out to the guys that were in the chat. To Brevin Campbell, Tevia Smolka, Paula Costo. There's to Wows.
Joe.
To Joe, yeah, to Joe's Geek Show. Thank you so much to Helam 29. Thank
Maverick.
you for commenting. But we did read the comments. I hope we addressed most of it. And yeah, guys, thank you so much. I know we're gonna do this a lot. We tried to do StreamYard. StreamYard.com StreamYard is a great streaming service. Give StreamYard a try. I encourage it. It's well worth it. All the little stuff you see on the screen here that I played around with as you watched, it's all because of StreamYard. So give it a shot. And in the meantime, I'm going to let you guys go. Dark Knight, thank you so much. And until next time, comment out. And Dark Knight, do you have an end signal or?
Well, citizens of the multiverse, all I can say is thank you guys for sticking around and watching. Thank you guys for talking. I appreciate all of the conversation and how particularly we're able to have these conversations and these disagreements, both with people in the chat and with us together on this stream. And we're able to move forward from that and acknowledge those things and just have a good time loving comics. So thank you everybody for watching and being so fair spirited. And boom, it is always a great time. So thank you for hosting me, man.
All right. See you guys later.